Mercedes lodged a formal protest against the Australian Grand Prix results, arguing that the lengthy safety car periods and the near presence of a recovery crane had materially affected the outcome for Kimi Antonelli and George Russell. After a marathon steward's review, the FIA issued an official statement. While the Australian GP result would stand for drivers who finished on track, minor post-race penalties and clarifications shuffled the points allocation. Though the protest didn't drastically upend the final order, Mercedes argued it was a matter of principle, ensuring that no race procedures gave certain drivers an unintended disadvantage. The FIA's response signalled that while safety protocols might evolve, the basic integrity of the result remained intact. All it took was a few early crashes to shift the spotlight onto the FIA. The first safety car procedure seemed routine: gather the scattered cars, clear debris, and get racing again. Yet, repeated incidents kept marshals returning to the track, lengthening these caution periods. Drivers groaned about losing tyre temperature, while teams scrambled to decide if a pit stop under the safety car made sense, even though conditions were changing every lap. The real controversy ignited when a recovery crane protruded onto the damp circuit. With drivers like Norris and Verstappen trailing behind the safety car at reduced speed, the presence of heavy machinery so close to the racing line triggered a social media firestorm. Fans referenced grim moments from F1's past, demanding a red flag for safety's sake. The FIA, however, concluded that speeds were controlled enough to safely remove the stalled car without halting the entire race. Critics labelled the call irresponsible. Supporters felt it preserved the racing flow. Each added lap under caution left some teams fuming at the missed opportunity to race. Others welcomed the breather to manage worn tyres. The net effect was a roller coaster of pit strategies, as no two teams seemed to align on what would happen once green flags waved again. And lurking beneath it all was the big question: would the track remain drivable if the rain picked up, or would further delays spark even more heated debate? From the crack of dawn, the skies over Albert Park looked anything but friendly. Teams peered at weather radars, trying to decipher whether a quick shower or a full-fledged deluge would decide their fate. Ferrari opted for a rumoured, rain-friendly car setup in the hopes of dominating if the sky truly opened up. Across the paddock, Red Bull took a cautious route, prepping Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson for whatever the heavens threw at them. McLaren too found themselves in a balancing act: get enough downforce for wet grip without sacrificing straight-line speed. Lando Norris appeared unfazed by the uncertainty, quietly confident in the team's measured approach. Meanwhile, Mercedes looked uneasy, especially after overhearing paddock chatter about potential red flag scenarios if the rain got serious. Every mechanic, strategist and engineer felt the weight of the unknown. Under these conditions, the Australian Grand Prix was either going to be a cunning battle of wits or a blind roll of the dice. Tension spiked further when the formation lap arrived. Jack Doohan, coping with cold tyres and a damp track, skidded into a barrier early, causing a ripple of anxiety over tyre management. Even worse, Isaac Hadjar spun out entirely before completing a single racing lap, shocking fans who'd pinned hopes on his highly anticipated debut. With that, the mood shifted from mild concern to full-blown alert. If drivers were slipping on minimal precipitation, what would happen if the downpour truly intensified? Isaac Hadjar's abrupt exit set the tone for a punishing day for newcomers. Jack Doohan soon followed suit, losing traction and finding the wall. The synergy between a slippery circuit, tyre management, and raw torque proved lethal. These young guns discovered that tiny errors, like hitting a painted line or accelerating too aggressively, can send even the most talented prospects straight into the barriers. Liam Lawson started in the pit lane, initially looking steady enough to salvage something from a precarious grid spot. Yet, inconsistent grip and multiple safety car restarts robbed him of the rhythm he needed. Each caution phase reset the field, negating any progress he managed. While Lawson's day ended in frustration, the real rookie revelation was Andrea Kimi Antonelli. He avoided the early chaos, took measured risks, and capitalized on others' mistakes. Despite the spray and constant traffic, Antonelli remained cool, rising steadily through the positions. By mid-race, commentators were buzzing with praise, pointing out his uncanny composure for someone still new to the highest level of motorsport. In a Grand Prix that devoured rookies, Antonelli emerged unscathed and emboldened. And then, of course, there was Oscar Piastri, technically in his second season, yet still riding that line between rookie and rising star. Although racing at his home Grand Prix, Piastri found himself in a tug-of-war with Lando Norris, who had the upper hand with fresher insights on racing in tricky conditions. Team orders briefly froze Piastri behind Norris, fueling speculation about whether McLaren might be nursing a hierarchy. But even with frustration simmering, Piastri managed to stay clear of the incidents that sidelined many of his peers. Ferrari arrived in Australia intent on flaunting a wet-oriented setup that, on paper, should have given Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton a leg up in the event of a true downpour. But as the weather settled into a lukewarm drizzle, the setup's advantages stayed dormant. Hamilton looked particularly unsettled, locking tyres in slow corners and struggling to put power down on exit. Meanwhile, Leclerc wrestled with traction, radioing concerns about rear instability. When heavier rain finally taunted the track, Ferrari's pit wall became a hub of uncertainty. Rival teams called for intermediates with confidence, trusting the forecast enough to commit. Ferrari, by contrast, hesitated. Hamilton pitted while Leclerc gambled an extra lap, leading to a mismatch in strategy. By the time Leclerc came in, half the grid had already secured track position. An exasperated Leclerc criticised the timing, while Hamilton lamented that his early pit stop had dropped him into mid-pack traffic. It was a snapshot of a team that had all the ingredients for success, except unified decision-making at the crucial hour. Worse still, the partial advantage their wet setup offered never truly materialised. Rather than unleashing a flood, the sky delivered intermittent bursts of rain that turned each corner into a guessing game. Ferrari's bet on consistent deluges simply didn't pay, and as they scurried to adapt, other teams capitalised, leaving Maranello's finest dejected and down the order. In the midst of the stops, starts, and swirling opinions, Alex Albon became a star for Williams. Long seen as a driver with unfulfilled potential, he turned adversity to his advantage, jumping on every chance that opened when rivals spun or hesitated. His calm, analytical radio transmissions stood out in the chaos. At one point, he chose to pit just a lap earlier than a cluster of competitors, gaining crucial positions that he never relinquished. Meanwhile, tensions within McLaren simmered. Lando Norris had the lead foot, especially when the track began drying in certain sections. Oscar Piastri wanted a piece of the action, his local support fueling the desire to impress. But a mid-race radio call held him behind Norris until the team gave a begrudging green light. By then, Norris had broken free, forging the gap he'd used to keep Max Verstappen at bay in the later stages. And what about Mercedes? Kimi Antonelli and George Russell had flashes of promise, but found themselves mired in the never-ending strategy shuffle. While Hamilton tried to keep pace with the leaders, Russell got entangled in mid-pack battles, losing precious seconds. Mercedes left Australia with a sense of unfinished business, which would soon boil over into a formal protest about race management. As the race wound down, another burst of rain arrived just when a drier line seemed possible. Cars on slicks scrambled for grip, praying the conditions would ease. In this tense atmosphere, Lando Norris kept his cool, tiptoeing through Sector 3, while every corner threatened to hand Max Verstappen the lead. Behind them, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton tried split strategies to salvage Ferrari's weekend, one gambling on fresh intermediates, the other staying out a lap too long. Neither approach delivered the surge they needed. Meanwhile, Andrea Kimi Antonelli aimed for a shock top 5 finish, and Alex Albon held his ground in a high-scoring position. Ultimately, Norris secured victory, halting Verstappen's usual dominance and sparking McLaren celebrations. Verstappen took second, visibly frustrated but acknowledging the fight. Albon's heroics netted Williams a hefty points haul, Ferrari was left licking its wounds, and Antonelli capped off a dream debut,